Hello and welcome to another episode of Rugby Through the Leagues podcast. Hope you all enjoyed last week with Darragh Coyle on, where we had everything about Irish rugby. See a couple of comments on YouTube as well about people that have been in the youth system and stuff like that to understand their now progression paths. So it was really good to see that people are getting some sort of benefit out of it. Darragh, another top bloke, really good to get him involved as well. So this week, as I mentioned, we've got Matt Merritt on. So Matt Merritt's a world-renowned writer, shall we say, for rugby, especially women's rugby. So this is a PWR special. So we are talking about all things women's rugby ahead of the season opener, which is actually, so this episode will go out on the 4th. So on the 5th, we got the season opener for the PWR. Obviously got the women's X15 going on at the minute as well. So not all of the England pros and other pros around the leagues are available, but gives us a good chance to see some other talent in the PWR as well. So really good catch up with Matt. I know it's a different change of pace getting a journo on and understanding a different aspect of rugby, but obviously somebody's got to write about it rather than us bleating on about how we think we could do it better, etc., as fans and players, etc. So we've actually obviously got a journo on who's managed to make a semi-pro living out of it, as he self-declared, but very good at what he does, very articulate. A really interesting bloke as well, and somebody that loves the women's game and was able to put up some amazing arguments and discussions around it, and even hung his hat on a few predictions for the season ahead as well. So it was a really good one to get on. Slightly change of pace to what we normally do. There's a few things happening in the background as well. Hopefully the grassroots rugby attendances is going to come back in the near future as well. So we're doing that. Don't forget to catch up on the rugby return. It's been delayed a little bit due to issues with the software, but I have been back to training. I have been back. The game got missed due to unavailability, but we've got a game on this weekend, which will be the 5th as well. So alongside the PWR season opener, we've also got my potential return to rugby, depending if I get picked, obviously, or don't get crocked in between. But don't forget to catch up with the rugby return. It's going to be going out on YouTube specifically, and then obviously available on sort of Instagram and TikTok. So catch up on that. Make sure you get involved in this one, and this one's a really good one. Completely different chase of pace. So get involved. Comment on it. It's really good to get involved, and don't forget, get watching that PWR, because what a tournament that's going to be this season.
This week we've got Matt Merritt on. Self-confessed semi-pro rugby fan. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, well, I can't quite make a living off it, but if someone's going to pay me to spout my opinions, then, you know.
And the majority of your opinions is around being a massive advocate for the women's game as well. And obviously, we thought we'd do this episode ahead of the PWR. Season opener starts on the 4th or the 5th of October. Is that correct?
Yep, spot on. I keep saying the 4th, but there's no Friday game, so.
No, so yeah, the 5th now. So obviously this pod will go out on the 4th. So perfect timing. We thought, let's get it out there. Let's spread the word, and hopefully at the end, Matt, we'll get you to hang your hat on some predictions for the season, and we'll hold you to it throughout the year.
No worries. I just write different ones when I put my article up.
That's it. Yeah, just keep differing every time.
Yeah.
For those that aren't aware, Matt, obviously you write a lot of rugby pieces for a lot of rugby sort of articles and stuff. Can you just sort of go through your journey, how you got into that? Did you play as a kid, etc., and sort of where you're at and what you've been and where you've seen?
Yeah, sure. So I followed rugby as a kid. My dad played. So
okay.
My dad's was from Exeter, so deep in rugby heartlands down there in the southwest, and joined the Navy. And long before I was born, played for the Navy, and then settled in Portsmouth. So when I was growing up, we'd kind of always watch the Six Nations, that sort of thing, chuck a ball around, played a little bit at school, never really joined a club. Everyone wanted to join Havant, and Portsmouth were in a pretty sorry state back in the early 90s when I would have been kind of looking for a club as a kid. So never really got into it, and then fell away because it's not a place where you've got tons of rugby fans. When you find people, you kind of build a little community around it. But 2015, so coming up for 10 years ago now, I lost my dad. And one of the ways I was looking to reconnect was kind of thinking about memories, and we had the World Cup in England. Yeah. So rugby was everywhere, and that was our thing when I was a kid. So it was a really nice way to reconnect. So kind of dived into that absolutely head first, watching every game, kind of soaking it up, and then literally just put all of the clubs in the Premiership into Google Maps. Right, where can I get to easily? And by pure chance, London Irish were the first team I booked tickets for, and without realising, I booked for the St Patrick's Day game, which was always a hell of a party.
Yeah.
And within about 10 minutes, I was like, I'm hooked. This is it. This is my team. This is where I want to be every week. Went to the next game and realised it wasn't always quite such a party. And there weren't always 20,000 people in the stadium. There were quite often 2,000. But that was it. I was hooked. So started following Irish. The next season, I bought a season ticket. Got chatting to some people. Found out one of them ran the supporters club. And we kind of became mates. And he found out I'd got a little bit of a kind of background in journalism, so I'd written about music for some years, covered a bit of theatre, things like that as well, in local press and in kind of webzines, underground magazines, things like that, from a music point of view. And he said, look, I'm just looking for driving traffic to the supporters club website. Do you fancy writing some stuff? No problem. And turned up at a kind of pre-season event like all clubs have, bring the season ticket holders down, meet the players. And I was chatting away, and they're like, "Oh, Petrus du Plessis over there. You're interviewing him in a couple of minutes." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." Went over, had a little chat, wrote some notes down, and that it kind of went from there. I wrote player interviews in the Sports Club website pretty much every week. So I spoke to all the players there. Started to kind of try and focus on players that were coming up. I was sponsoring Ollie Hassel-Collins coming through the academy. Nice. So obviously wanted to give him and his mates a bit of coverage. And then from there, I started watching women's rugby because I came across it on the telly. I knew it existed, but it was hard to find. Saw a game and thought, oh, you know what, this is great, and no one's covering it. There was nothing out there. You get write-ups on Red Roses games occasionally, and Sky covered them for a little while and then kind of dropped it unceremoniously. So I just kind of chanced my arm and started dropping him into women's players' DMs, which sounds like a horrible thing to do. Just saying, like, would you be up for a chat? I want to promote the game. And I had a blog that I'd been using for my theatre coverage anyway, so I kind of repurposed that and just started publishing a few interviews. That turned into kind of building a bit of a rapport with some journalists, and then we went into lockdown. And because I was a bit known to kind of the media people at that point, I got invited to cover a game at Twickenham in lockdown, which is the weirdest experience of my life.
That must have been proper odd. Like people talk about it now, like at football and stuff like that, and they talk about being able to hear players calling and like making those decisions and things, but that must have been odd. Sat there as a journo, sort of listening to all of that.
It was a double-header game. It was England women v France women, and then England men v Ireland men.
Yeah.
So for the women's game, it was me and one other journalist in the press box, and then on the other side of the stadium, just to kind of social distance, there were two other journalists, and that was it. And they turned up, and they're like, "Oh, you know where the seats are?" No idea. Never been here as press. Just find it. So you're just wandering around the stadium with no lights turned on, trying to work out where the hell we were going. Thankfully, a guy called Harry Latham Coyle, who's a brilliant writer, look up his stuff, well worth checking out, kind of took me under his wing because he'd been there before and kind of guided me where to go. And it was fantastic. You could hear every word spoken on the bench, and it was a noted game because England felt like they might lose to France, which at Twickenham was a big deal. And Simon Middleton, who was the coach at the time, decided I think it's the 58th minute, he just emptied the entire bench. They did kind of 8 swaps at once and completely changed the course of the game, which felt like insanity at the time. And from there, I started picking up bits and pieces. I did an opinion piece on in Rugby World. They used to have an article, so someone would argue for and someone would argue against. And I got the against for should we let Welsh and Scottish teams into the Premier 15s as it was at the time. And from that ended up writing their season preview for the last season of Premier 15s. And that just kind of led to getting some offers to write for Rugby Pass and went from there. And it's been
Nice.
great. I've done a bit for World Rugby as well for the WXV tournament. And anyone who is willing to pay me to speculate or cover a game or whatever, always willing to share an opinion.
Brilliant. And it's the game of rugby does bring people together like that. As you said, like that, you've got that passion because it was what you did with your dad. And then a lot of stuff there, obviously, it opens the doors. People are willing to have that conversation and understand that as well. And I think the women's game is going great guns. And I think the way that either they're promoting within themselves is massively admirable because they've had to lead the charge a lot of it themselves as well. So
100%. Yeah, the clubs don't or haven't historically wanted to put the effort in. Some have. I won't tar everyone with the same brush, but not many do. So players have had to become marketing experts. They've had to become social media gurus just to be able to get a few bums on seats to watch them play the game.
Yeah.
And it's only kind of in the past couple of years that they've started to realise the value in a lot of ways of the women's game. I mean, coverage is on TNT, so through Discovery now, which is fantastic, albeit that it puts it behind a paywall. But they used to kind of stream a couple of games here and there, and then clubs would have to do their own web streams, which is great. That some clubs wanted to put their games out there, but it meant that a couple of years ago there were clubs who'd only be seen once, maybe on a stream the entire season, and then other clubs, Quins and Saracens leading the charge, who you could watch every single week.
Do you think the current coverage is enough?
It's better than it ever has been. I think there's always space for more, and I'm concerned about casual fans finding the game. It's £30 a month for that. So if you're a massive sports fan and you discover women's rugby on top of all the other sports you love, then great. But if you're someone who's like, I'm kind of intrigued by this, that's a lot of money to pay out to find it out. It's cheaper to go to a game, so they're going to get more fans through live viewing where there's a team close by. So if you're in London or kind of the central south, you're fine. You've got plenty of clubs. But if you're up in the north, there's Sale, and that's it.
Sale.
They used to have,
They got Durham. Is it Durham, or have they sort of fell by the wayside now as well?
Used to have DMP, so Darlington Mowden Park Sharks. They were, when they last did the league restructure, they were dropped out, and they've never really recovered. So there's champ teams up there. Novocastrians is a really good championship level team, but the championship, kind of like the men's game, gets scant support from the RFU.
Yeah.
So if you know where to find it, it can be found. But it's apart from those 9 teams in the PWR, it's hard to find the info if you're not already kind of semi-aware.
Yeah. Do you think the I touched on this? I'll drop that little bomb on the Instagram, and you mentioned on it, a comment on it. The price of being able to just be an armchair rugby fan is accelerating, to say the least, and even then, coverage is average at best. It's fair to say. 90 quid a month is a lot of money in a current crisis, like economic crisis, really. And the biggest ones we're going to lose is kids, and the biggest opportunity for kids to get into the game and potentially become pro is within the women's game. Exactly.
100%.
I think we're potentially missing a boat on. We've done. I think again, it could end up like the men's game, where people have managed to go pro, think they've done enough on that bit, and then take their foot off the gas, because that's what's happened with the men. The ones that stood around, they got pro, they got that, they got the sticky label, they've done that. Now it's not their problem. Somebody else has got to actually turn it professional. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the women's game has learned a lot from the men's, in as much as it's elite, but it's almost unfair in some ways to call the PWR truly a professional league. I mean, the players are absolutely professionals in their approach, but there's a lot of women in that league who aren't getting paid a penny. Yeah. And most of the ones who are being paid, it's unless you've got an international contract, you're not being paid enough to live off of. You're just getting a decent stipend. It's boot money. It's old school boot money, except the taxman's aware of it and there's a paper trail. yeah, your point around kind of the cost to watch it, I think the English game suffers. TNT's coverage from a camera setup, things like that, is great. They visualize the game beautifully, but it costs a lot to get it. It's the same few voices every week. I don't think there's a lot of variety in their presentation. The women's game is getting a bit like that as well.
Do you think their analysis is good enough as well? Because like you watch, if you ever go to the dark side and you sit and watch Monday Night Football or anything like that, you've got Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville standing up there pointing, drawing on what they would do, how they'd do this, do that, and showing people in their funny little way. But you don't see that at rugby. You don't see what a pro, like they say, oh, I would have done this or we'd have done this.
Yeah, it's very rare visualization. And actually that's something that's dropped away. Sky used to do it back in the day. I mean, Will Greenwood would always talk at 100 miles an hour, but he would get his big board out and draw diagrams and talk people through it, and that was great.
Yeah.
I think that there's this weird misconception that rugby's complicated and we've got to simplify it, and I hate that. I think rugby's actually really simple. If you get into the depths of it, of course, it's complicated. Every single sport is. But rugby's pretty simple. It's 15 massive blokes against 15 massive blokes trying to get a ball to the end of a pitch. Essentially, that's all it is. And I think we should revel in the technicalities of it more. NT's coverage, to your point, they don't always go into the detail they do. I'm in Norse, so if they gave David Flatman an hour a week show where he just showed me scrums, I'd be in heaven.
Better than Paul up that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just look, here's where this guy dipped his shoulder a little bit and the scrum fell apart, and here's what he should have done. I'd be all over it. And to be fair, they when they used to have that kind of magazine midweek show, they tried to do a bit of that with kind of getting local teams in and stuff, but that just seems to have dropped away and it's become very formulaic. They've got a lot of good people, but it's the same combinations of good people week in, week out. And I think it just needs a bit of a reshuffle. They've brought some great talent in with the women's game coming in. Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me is if I'm interested in rugby but I don't have an allegiance to a team, TNT has all the English rugby and it's 30 quid, but Premier Sports is half the price and has French rugby. It has Champions Cup and Challenge Cup rugby. It's got the URC. So actually, we might get loads of casual fans, but they're going to want to follow teams in another country. We're going to get kind of people in the West Country who suddenly become, I was going to say Dragons fans, but that's a bit extreme, but maybe Cardiff or Ospreys fans. We're going to get kind of people in the North who are massively underserved with rugby. They might start following Edinburgh and Glasgow, and great for Edinburgh and Glasgow that they could get more fans, but we want to look after our own, right? We want to build that pathway. We've lost, 5 professional teams or elite teams in the last 2 years?
Lost track now. Yeah, it's obscene. And I think geographical distances are also the killer of the game. I know that a lot of them have been there, but you've got to add more teams in. We've got to inject some more into the Premier League. There's got to be more.
100%. And there's clubs there that could do it with a bit of swap. Yep,
Ealing's not the option because it's another London club. It's just they're there because they've got the money. Like you need something like a Coventry, you need a Nottingham, you need
Doncaster would be perfect.
Donny or Rotherham, one of them. Just some, and then it'd be brilliant for sort of a Pompey or a Hampshire sort of area, because to get the Quins is an ag. It's the cost, and because the games are on at Saturday afternoons, everyone that loves the game, that wants to go and watch the game, is usually playing the game. Yeah, and it's if it was closer, I think you'd get more people going to a game because they could just finish theirs, jump on the train with a few mates, a few tinnies, get over there, watch a game, go home.
100%. And if you make the game an event, and rugby doesn't play a huge amount of games through the year, so it's not hard to make most of your fixtures an event if you really put the effort into it. People will travel all manner of distances. I don't know if you've ever had the misfortune to be on a train to London on the same day the Army-Navy game is on.
I was probably one of them degenerates on that, or on one of the coaches.
It's been me a few times, but I've also forgotten it's on and got the train up there, and oh my god, it's like another universe. But that's a no disrespect to the lads playing in it, but it's not a top end quality game of rugby. There's some good players turn out different years, but it's a hell of an event, and they've made it one that you absolutely want to be at, and it's not expensive. It's kind of £30 to get a decent ticket and go along and have a party. And Sevens has done the same sort of thing. Not that London's got a Sevens event anymore; it's been dropped from the circuit. But I think the rest of rugby needs to learn from that, and it needs to build back up. And that's like you say, it's bringing in more clubs. It's more geographic diversity. It's having a second tier that's properly supported. I was following Irish both their seasons in the Champ. I actually loved it. There's so much fun going to those smaller clubs. They might not have pretty stadiums that look fantastic on telly. I mean, we were at Brentford, and that was the best stadium I've ever been to. It's phenomenal, shiny and new, and fantastic lights. But give me a game at the Menai in Penzance any day. It looked like a potato field with rugby being played on it, but it's just such a joy to be there. Everyone was having a fantastic time, and you just got hooked in the buzz of it. And they also did tribute by the litre.
Similar situation. I'm a Pompey fan, always have been. So I've gone to football, and Pompey went all the way down to League Two, and I had a season ticket. And I'd go to Accrington for a midday kickoff, and you think, how have we got this low? But they're also some of the best days out because it is so shit. You ain't got to worry about nothing. We stood in the away end at Accrington once, and Sky, in their infinite wisdom, decided to put the cameraman on top of a scaffold tower in the middle of the away end, which was built with scaffolding as it was. And then Pompey scored a penalty, and I've never seen a cameraman nearly die at a game because he was getting shaken every.
Yeah, he must have felt like he was sailing in the middle of the ocean, just side to side, bless him. It's just so much fun.
See that.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been to Goldington Road, where Bedford play.
No, I haven't. No.
Great little stadium, and it's got a really nice atmosphere. They can pack 5,000 fans in it. They've done under-20s internationals and even women's internationals there in the past. Yeah, and it's got a great vibe. It's also got one corner that's about 2 foot lower than the rest of the pitch. So there's a quarter of the pitch that you're guaranteed, if you get a scrum in it, you can just drive that scrum straight over the try line. So there's tactical advantages to it, which just brings me so much joy that it's not just some perfect plastic pitch. It's got its own quirks and its own kind of vibe that makes it completely unique. And I think we need to celebrate that. Rugby's a niche sport. It's never going to get the collective crowds that football can. You can match a football match with a rugby match, but if you look at the amount of people who are spending their money to go and watch football every week, rugby's never going to get to that. So stop trying to be that. Be your own thing and revel in it.
I think there's an element of people do expect us to try and get to that level, but we're worried about breaking our values, etc., etc. But then we're not building on the values that we've got, and we don't push it forward. And I think probably the women's game is the best way of moving that forward because it brings everyone together.
100%, and people can see themselves in the women's game in a way they can't in the men's. I've met and kind of interacted with loads of men's players, and there's some that I would consider friends, and they're lovely guys, but mostly they're from kind of middle-class backgrounds. Many of them have gone to private school. Henry Arundel landed at London Irish as a kid. He's this exciting young kid, and he's a fantastic player, but he went to Eton. How many people in the stands are going to be able to relate to him growing up in a kind of an elite school? And you're destined for great things when you go there because all the pathways are laid, and you've got to really screw up to miss it. But you go to the women's game, and Sadia Kabaya, for my money, she's probably a year, maybe 2 years away when she gets back from fitness from being World Player of the Year. She's phenomenal, and she's still basically a kid. She's only going to get better. But she grew up in like on a council estate in London, like that's as real as you can get. Like
Yeah.
anyone can relate to her story and the fact that she didn't have a clue what rugby is till Bryony Cleal came and worked as a PE teacher in her school.
Yeah, madness.
These are people that have grown up in the places we've grown up. They've lived trod the paths we've trodden. I mean, we're Pompey lads. Vicky Cornborough played for Portsmouth Women and then ended up playing for Quins and playing for England. Like we can see that pathway.
Now.
Yeah,
She's back
exactly.
Now, so
exactly.
Taking it back. So
put the married name on and destroying scrums in the amateur game for fun. I pity any team who rocks up and just sees she's at one today. Just go right off our scrums.
They got Donna Jones as well. She's come across as a forwards coach for Havant as well. They've got some really big movements there, and they had 54 women or something like that the other week for training on a Tuesday night, and it's just exceptional. Like I can't, I hate it being a gospel boy. I hate having to give Havant praise, but we had Will Knight on and Oz, and obviously had Sean Sheps on, and I popped over there while I was back in England and sort of met up with them, and what they've done over there was phenomenal. I went to they had a pre-season friendly against Brighton, and they had 54 players there for the game. Brighton turned up with 17. Haven't had 54 players trying to go for the first two.
Yeah, it's what you want, right? And they had a Red Roses under-20s game there, which blew my mind. But at the same time, that's exactly what we should be doing. Look at the amateur clubs that have good facilities, whether it's like Grasshoppers, Dings, Crusaders, where Bristol Bears women play their games. There's plenty of clubs like that up and down the country. Darlington, Moden Park are one of them. Get your under-20s games there. Make them free, or better yet, don't make them free. Charge just a couple of quid, because a ticket that costs someone £1, they're actually more excited about than one that's free, because free means this doesn't hold value. But if I have to pay, even if it's a shiny coin in my pocket, it means more. Get those games there and people will come. And I have no doubt that Havant are getting that many players through the door because some of them came and watched future Red Roses. Players that probably will go to the World Cup this year, like Lily Ives Campion were playing in that game.
Yeah, it's great to see. And as you say, even as the under-20s tour or any of those other games, there will be certain games that don't need to be played at HQ as well.
Yeah.
Go round, like go and play them at, like, they're filling the doors a lot of the time, but some of those pre-season games, they're not the autumn internationals, etc. Those random friendlies that they're going to play against lesser clubs or lesser national teams, they don't need to be at HQ. It's brilliant, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't always need to be over at Gloucester. You don't need to constantly go back to Gloucester as the backup option. Yeah,
it's Gloucester, it's Northampton, it's very occasionally Exeter. There's so many other clubs out there. And 100%. You know what? If there's not good rugby facilities, there's guaranteed to be good football facilities, and it's pretty easy to paint some lines and put some crossbars up. We do it for World Cups. We play at Brighton there. What's the harm in, I don't know, going to Coventry for one, or looking at, I don't know, get Elland Road. Put a rugby union game in Elland Road.
Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Try and do something like that. Like, why can't we go? Like Wembley.
Yeah.
Rugby League managed to get the door open. Why can't we go there?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Rugby League pains me to say it as a Union fan, because, you know, you've got to have that banter between Union and League. That's, as long as it's friendly, it's fun. But they're actually pretty switched on in how they use Wembley, and they make it a full day event. It's 100%. Like a big deal. Let's do more of that. The Prem final doesn't need to be at Twickenham. Find somewhere else for it.
Mix it up. You've got
around
to
the
do
country.
something.
Yeah. Make clubs bid for it.
Yeah, worst case, they do what happens with if whoever wins it the season before, they get a hold of it the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
they might not be in that final, but it opens the door to other clubs playing it, like other fans seeing neutral clubs at their own ground.
Yeah, and you never know how it might inspire. I mean, Gloucester had the final for the PWR, or the last Premier 15s as it was, not the season just gone, the season before. And there was a lot of stink when they got announced because they were playing really well. Gloucester get the final and they're going to win it because it's a home game.
Yeah.
But Gloucester had been really mediocre every season prior to that. So, if they'd announced at the beginning of the season the final's going to be at Gloucester, no one would have batted an eyelid. It was only because Sean Lynn had invested years in getting that team and his build, and it had finally all clicked and got there. And actually, that's another point in the women's game. Although the trend's starting to change, historically they've given coaches years and years to build their team. Yeah, so we've seen the value of it. Sean Lynn's been at Gloucester for years. He's painstakingly built the team that played the rugby he wants to play. Beautiful running game, good passing, but a really strong pack. We've seen it at Saracens. Alex Austerbury have built some really good teams there. They've struggled a bit over the past couple of seasons, but they'll be in the final four again. Whether or not they make the final and win it is here nor there, but I would be shocked if they don't at least make the semi-finals. But then we've seen other clubs, they've seen a lot of shifting. Leicester Tigers have only been in the league a season. They're on the second coach. Same thing at Trailfinders Women, where they have Giselle Mather, who's one of the best in the game. Brilliant mind for rugby. She's there a season. She'd been there, to be fair, before the team really existed, building the pathways. But then she's moved on, and the optics of it are terrible. They've moved Barney Madison, who's a player in the men's team and was an assistant coach under Giselle, into head coach. He's never been a head coach in his life. I know Barney; he's a really good guy. And I think they've kind of stitched him up. They've put him in a position that's going to make him unpopular with fans. So he's going to have to take some time to win them around because he's replacing a legend.
Do you think they've used him as a sacrificial lamb because they can't find somebody else to take the role at the minute, or have they got a bigger plan but it's not ready to happen yet?
I think this was their plan, but it's suddenly happened probably 2-3 years before they expected it to, because he was in the playing squad and he had to retire to take the role. So I think their plan was he would assistant coach again this year, and then maybe he'd be head coach under Giselle as DOR next year, and then eventually take it over fully. And I think her going probably made them go, well, we were going to move to this eventually anyway, let's just do it now. And it just...
Was there a lot going on behind the scenes there, Matt, do you think?
Everything I hear is that Giselle had a vision for how things would progress, and a really strong vision. And Dave Ward, who oversees all rugby at Ealing, had a different vision, which is fine. These things happen. But it's not a great look. And sometimes you have to give people that time. Like if she'd been there 3 seasons, there'd been no progress. And he was like, I don't agree with your vision. We're going to move on. You totally get it. But she'd had 1 season of building a team from scratch, and they didn't do great, but Exeter are the only team who's come into that league and immediately been good since it began. Yeah,
it doesn't just happen overnight, does it? And it doesn't matter how much money you throw at facets of the game, it doesn't change anything. You still need time. You can't buy time.
No, and like you can sign good players, and Giselle did. I mean, her first signing was Abby Dow. You can't get much better than that.
It's a solid signing, that.
Yeah, but when you're signing those players because they're names and they'll get bums on seats, but equally if they're a Red Rose or they play for GB7s, as a number of their signings did and do, you're also signing a player you're not going to see for half of the season. So you've got to give the players that are sitting underneath the chance to build up, because most of those were either players at other clubs where they would lower in the pecking order, or they came from champ clubs. So London Irish Emeralds, which is their amateur women's team, are in Championship 1, and 2 or 3 of their players signed for Ealing and were kind of dual contracted. And, they might end up doing fantastic. They picked up some good young players and they're developing them through, but it takes time. Coming up to that level, that, I mean, if you're going from playing some good teams to suddenly you're lining up against a front row that's got Hannah Bottoman on one side and Sarah Byrne on the other, and Lark Davies sat between the two of them, that's a big step up, and it's going to take you time to adjust to it.
So I spoke to Mark down at Portsmouth early on in the pod, I think episode 9 or something he was on, Mark Witcher, and he'd obviously been part of the women's game and sort of coached a few players that had gone on, and he said that the gap between the Prem and the Championship and below so vast at the minute, it's not accessible for players just to step between the two because the availability isn't consistently there. Do you ever see that gap closing, or do you see that getting bigger, or do you not see the gap that Mark sort of said that's there?
I think he's 100% right. I think the way the amateur game, which is everything that isn't the PWR, is structured, lends it to having a gap, because you've got your Champ 1 is kind of north and south, and both are pretty chunky leagues. So while that's great for player travel, it limits people driving from one end of the country to the other on their day off. That golf is massive, and having two kind of Championship 1 leagues, one north, one south, it lends for a really nice end to the season, because you get a playoff final to see where the north or south is better. But it just means there's a lot of players playing at a level rather than being able to get the progression up and down. And even with kind of that many players at that level, they're having struggles. We've had 1 week of the season and we've already had a game called off because one team couldn't field a front row. And if you speak to any clubs in the Greater London area, so Henley, London Irish, Richmond, anyone around there, they're all struggling because the Prem clubs, the PWR clubs, are losing players to internationals because the WXV tournament is about to kick off. So that means for their kind of pre-season warm-up cup tournament that they've just run, they're borrowing props off of Champ 1 clubs, which means Champ 1 clubs don't have any props, which means they can't play games. So it's a real struggle. So what I would say is, if you're a young lady, woman, girl, trying to get into the game, front row is the place to be. You'll get some game time.
Yeah. And you get to eat as much pizza as you want and everything like that as
absolutely.
well. So
and you're the coolest people in the game, except for maybe Ilona Maher.
Yeah. She's, as we said about people forging a path through their own social media channels, she's unreal.
Absolutely. I mean, she's absolutely riding it. And, that might drop in a year's time. She might have the bubble might have burst because she's an Olympian and that has a kind of timescale. But fair play to her. She is maximising that. And she's got enough personality that I think she'll still be a big figure in a year's time. It's just that people might have forgotten it's because of rugby.
She set the target to be part of the 15s World Cup, hasn't she? So she wants to be at the World Cup. So hopefully she doesn't lose her way and people think she's just a social media star. It'd be interesting because she's only played a couple of games of 15s at top level. I don't even know what her position is. I don't really care. As long as she's involved, then it means she's doing pre and post match interviews, which means we've got gold coming our way. What position do you reckon she would play at 15s? I'd be picking centre.
I mean, if I was given a choice, I'd be trying her outside centre.
Yeah,
she's a big unit and she's a fast runner, so she could punch hella big holes in defences.
And she can play as well. Yeah. She's got hands on her as well. She can play. It's not like it's just pure size at playing sevens. She can play as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why part of me thinks, do you really... I mean, it's tough for USA because they've got Kate Zachary, but she's an 8 who can play 13. So do you stick her in the backs and put Ilona Maher off the back of a scrum? Because you wouldn't want to do it against the top 2 or 3 teams. But if you're USA playing, I don't know, Spain or someone like that, why not have someone like her who can just pick the ball up off the back of a scrum and run like hell?
I watched the Spain women's 50, they're quite a bit, to be fair, out here. They're easily accessible to go and watch the games out here. They usually play down at Levere. They're no mugs. They've got a very, very good side. And to be honest, I think off that sort of around the sort of pack area, I think they dominate. There's potentially gaps through their back line in Spain, but fuck me, they don't half tackle. They will tackle anything and everything. And I some of it, I was like, that ball's gone. And then next thing, they've made this cover tackle out of nowhere, and I was like, this is, and it was like, it's so cheap. We'll go down at Levere. It's about 40 minutes down the road from here, and their pitch is not the greatest, shall we say. There's lots of little bits that look like Margate Beach dropped on some of it, but it costs like 30 quid for all four of us to go and watch an international game. And we did that for the men's as well. So there was a double header. So Spain against the USA for the final and Canada against Brazil. And I think it cost us €45 for the four of us. They made a full day of it. The kids were able to do bits out the back. There was a DJ between. There was PlayStation 5s with Rugby 24 on it. The kids loved it. They had an absolute
It's exactly what you want, right?
Yeah,
everyone gets something out of it. And the kids, with the best will in the world, they don't even care about the rugby. They're having a great time regardless. So you can sit and enjoy the game, knowing that they're entertained, and they're not going to bother you. Everyone wins, and I agree. Spain are a good team. They're that classic team of like, if they can keep all of their best players fit, they can scare people.
Yeah,
their only worry is depth.
Well, I think obviously Bimba, she's come across to Quins as well and added strength there. The young 10 that signed across from Barcelona side as well. She's slotted in at Quins. She's
I think they're going to play her outside centre, so that'd be quite exciting.
Yeah, they've got some very good players that are now being exposed to the PWR as well, and I think it's great to see there's some exceptional players in the Spain women's team, and
and a lot of them kind of turning up in French teams, and the French league nearly impossible to watch, but phenomenal talent across that French women's league. When they finally get some sort of deal, and I'm hoping like Rugby Pass TV pick it up or something like that. That'll be fantastic because the quality over there is pretty good. Yeah, like there's fantastic rugby there. Put it on a channel where people can get it, and it's absolutely accessible in France. France are fantastic at making sure all their sport is televised. They've got kind of national regulations and things like that, which is great. But stick it on a Rugby Pass TV. Hell, stick it on YouTube. Let people see it. Let people get out there and get access to it. It's what we keep talking about. It's just access. Just get people to be able to get their eyes on the game. There's a bit of furore this week. I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here, but David Flatman has been covering the Prem Rugby highlights for years on ITV, and he kind of announced in the week, well, I'm not doing it anymore. It's a bit of a shock to me as well.
Jeez.
And you know, that is sad because rugby loves tradition more than anything else. But actually, they've got like Squidge Rugby doing it now. So the ITV highlights is Squidge. It's Lizzie Musso's like rugby with Lizzie Rugby or something. I can't remember what the thing is. It's the guy who does Rugby Nors. So actually what they're doing is hooking the people who aren't accessing rugby through the traditional means and putting those people in front of them. I'm not sure it's the right move because I'm not sure people who are getting their rugby fix through social media really give a monkeys about watching ITV at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night to see the highlights. But what they do get is they can stick on TikTok this person who you've seen talking about rugby on TikTok, and there's an ITV logo in front of it, and they're able to talk over actual live footage and react to it. So that's quite exciting, and that makes me think that we're about to see another sea change. I mean, we must be close to the point where the 2003 team don't hold value just because they have those medals, that they should be commentating on anything anymore. And the day, I mean, Woodward did a fantastic job winning that World Cup, but the day I never have to see him on a panel on ITV again will not be a day too soon.
I don't think there's a single time that me and my mates in our group chat, one of them will drop in a message watching it, why the fuck is Sir Clive still there?
Yeah. He's great, and all power to him for what he did. And even
But
like
that's what
Johnny
he did.
Wilkinson. Yeah.
What he did. It's not
Like,
relevant now because all he does now is saying, I won the World Cup, I'm fucking great. And it's boring.
yeah.
Yeah, you've done it.
And moan about everything. That's what really frustrates me. Like, and Johnny Wilkinson is dollars ditch water. Like, he just doesn't have a presence for that sort of role. He is the man who absolutely should have a whiteboard and a pen and be breaking down why things work. Because if he's just sitting there talking, he's not engaging anyone at all.
But just give him, as you say, give him the scribbly board and say, "Right, I could have done this. I've done this. I made this decision in this game because I've done this, this, and this. This is why this player's made that decision." If anyone's going to talk sense about the game and be able to talk about it because they've done it, is that man.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the rest of them, they kind of need to start moving off. Ben Kay's still pretty good, to be fair.
I like Ben Kay.
I like Lowell when you see him. He's an engaging personality on TV, but he doesn't add anything when he's on comms. It's just kind of cliche every time he speaks. They just need to be getting more variety in there. So even if you're still using those guys, freshen it up. You get more guys who are kind of a year, 2 years, 3 years removed from the game who can talk from personal experience. I want to hear, let's talk front row again. I want to see someone analysing Ellis Genge or something like that and going, yeah, well, when I propped against him, here's how I dealt with it, or here's kind of what I did.
This is why I couldn't. This is why I couldn't deal with it, because he does this, and this.
So special, because he doesn't always look like he's a special player.
No.
But those little fine details, and we will get there. We get kind of sea changes. I mean, it was forever the same people when Sky had rugby, and then when they lost all the rights, kind of the current group that's the TNT group became the kind of main voices and faces of rugby. I think you get an inevitable kind of changing of the guard every kind of decade or so. Sky went, the BT Sport crowd that's now TNT became the face of the sport, and I think at some point in the near future, some sort of rugby rights are going to have enough value that someone else is going to come in for it. So I can see PWR getting snapped up by a different provider. They'll build a crew around that. That could become the kind of face of rugby, and then they buy the Prem rights and bring them across as well, or vice versa.
And do you think Amazon Prime are in there? Do you think they've touched their toes in the autumn internationals or the autumn series or whatever they want to call it these days? But I think their coverage was half decent and made it accessible for a decent price point for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, liked what they did a lot. I think I can see them coming in for internationals again, 100%. I'm just not sure they've got the interest in doing weekly for a full season for a domestic league, because they want something
they
that tennis. They can buy the. Yeah, they want something they can go kind of worldwide, don't they?
That's proper boring tennis. So, like, if they're willing to throw some money at that, why can't they throw it at the women's game, which is what? It's only 6-7 months of the year, really, because there's not that many games, is there?
I think if they can see value in it, if they can get the World Cup final doing big numbers on TV outside of the two countries that are playing in it, that's when Amazon will go, there's money in this for us, and they'll swoop in and take it. But I honestly think, I don't know, have you ever checked out the Rugby Network? I think it's called. It's the kind of app / website that the US Men's League, the MLR,
got it on my phone.
Yeah, great. I think that kind of paid for version of that with British rugby on it, so that it's accessible, it's portable, it's easy to watch on the go. It's an app that you can load in through Fire Stick, your Roku, whatever. Yeah,
is that another thing that people have got to pay for though? That's the hard, because they won't be able to buy all the rights unless they get all the rights against all of it.
That's what I mean. I think
one-stop shop.
If we want to see big money, then it's got to stop being Prem Rugby trying to get their slice and PWR trying to get their slice and the URC trying to get their slice. package it, go out and go, look, this is a ton of rugby. It's, even if you take South Africa out of the mix, it's 2 big rugby markets in the UK and Ireland. Plus, you get an Italian rugby in there as well. Try and get, like, why isn't the organising committee behind the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup trying to get like the French teams, the French leagues on it as well? Build a big package deal on a point where people can come and play, watch rugby. Like, if people in the UK will pay out for like the NBA app or the NFL app, so they can watch all the games.
You've got to pay 40 quid a month or something like that for NFL on the zone for 4 months of the year or whatever it is.
Because you know you're getting everything, and you know that every game is going to be an event.
Yeah.
Like, make it worthwhile for people. Make them only have to go to one place, and they'll come and they'll book it. I mean, it's the old classic argument about music streaming versus pirating. Like, everyone went to Napster and LimeWire, but the moment iTunes came out and it was easy to go to one place to buy music, people were quite happy to pay. And then when you could just pay a flat fee and have all the music in the world at your fingertips with Spotify, people were quite happy to pay for that as well. Like, people don't mind paying a fair, reasonable price for a decent product that's easy to access. What we've got is half-decent products, sometimes very decent, sometimes not so much, that are really expensive for the amount that you get. And that just, it's going to turn people off. I mean, the Prem Rugby, they've lost 3 teams. But more than that, they've lost 3 teams worth of fans because they've done nothing to engage Wasps, Worcester and London Irish fans to say, stick around this league.
Well, so Bath have now been given the scouting area for what was London Irish. So Portsmouth is now covered under Bath.
Well, that's interesting because Portsmouth was London Irish and then it was Quins.
It's all under Bath.
So they're chopping it all up again. So probably Quins have snapped up that kind of streak of Berkshire and West London that Irish had. So that gives them all of that area. But like, for the existing fans, some of them are still going to games. I know some have become inexplicably fans of other teams really quickly. And some that just go along because they need that rugby fix. But I also know hundreds who just won't attend a Prem game because they just feel the league has turned its back on that group of fans. And I've heard the same from Wasps and Worcester fans as well. And they're just never going to get them back. And I know they're aiming for the next generation, but the generation that they're missing right now are the ones who've got money to pay for stuff. So they need to invest a bit of effort in engaging them as well.
I had Lexi on, who's still halfway through her journey at the minute, from going from John O'Groats to Land's End with her wheelchair challenge. And we were speaking about the women's game, and obviously she's a big Exeter fan, goes home and away, watches the games, watches the Red Roses and stuff. And I think we discussed the point that I believe the way the women's game gets to the level of the men's game is by a global TV rights agreement. I don't think the product is big enough to have just one league push that forward, because nobody's going to sign up for a 9-team PWR for 7 months. They're going to need an agreement for every women's league across the world, one global rights, one-stop shop. This is how we're going to bring the game forward. Who do you think would have the bollocks to do that, if there's any crazy enough?
As in, who would buy it?
Yeah, what sort of broadcaster has the sort of dynamic idea of trying to wrap that up and move that forward in that one big brand?
Right now, if you can ride that US momentum, ESPN is probably the only one I can see going, yeah, let's get stuck into that. And if you get ESPN, then you're on Disney+. So you're laughing all the way to the bank. That's where you want to hit. I don't think there's any terrestrially. You might package up, you get the rights for the world, but you'd have to chop it up, and you'd be selling to the kind of terrestrial channels in the individual markets, and that just gets messy as hell.
You don't need one game here, one game there. None of that. Netflix aren't that way inclined. I don't think they're looking at the Premier League, and they're looking at YouTube boxing, and I think they're a very big event based They might sign up for a World Cup. They might sign up for a Six Nations. Obviously, they're trying to get involved in that. But I don't believe them getting involved in a global product like that is on their remit.
No, not right now. What will be interesting, and it's a much bigger product right now. Next year, Netflix take on WWE. So every week they'll be having, I think it's Raw. The live broadcast will be Netflix worldwide.
They've reduced it from 3 hours to 2 hours already, though.
Yeah,
because they don't want it on for too long.
But that will be the kicker. If that does big numbers, and they're like, actually, people are willing to all log in at the same time, and their servers can handle it, because that's going to be a hell of a strain, especially that first one. Then they might start going, well, what other things can we get? And it might be like the women's game a couple of years ago. England Rugby would stream some games, and the clubs would stream some games, but the final was on BT Sport. So that one game was treated like a marquee game. So you might get a point where a provider picks up the women's game over here, and I really hope in the next couple of years that provider is ITV or BBC or Channel 4 instead of TNT, so it's really accessible.
Premier Sport might even, they've seemed to be trying to make big movements around it. And if it's still at an affordable price point, as you said, it's what, 15 quid a month?
Yeah.
For Champions Cup.
And if they've got almost everything, which they would have by that point.
Yeah, like it would be an asset for them to add. Worst case, they put it up to 20 quid a month, and you've pretty much got 7 different leagues of types of rugby to. It's just, have they got much of an app? Have they got much of something to use on your phone if you go into a game?
Their app's all right. Premier Sport's biggest thing is you can subscribe to it through Amazon Prime. So you can watch it through Amazon's app.
It's not contracted either, is it? So I think you pay a slightly
it's month
more.
by month. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's the one that you get the discount for the year, don't you? And then I think if you opt to do a month by month, so you could have a quiet month. I don't fancy watching any of the games. You don't subscribe to
just
it.
Unsubscribe in July, subscribe again in September.
Yeah.
That's
might be the option.
Forward.
It'd be lovely to see it on terrestrial, but it's not happening. They're not back to enough. I don't think anyone really is bothered by terrestrial anymore. Most people have got a Sky or some. Most people don't have the standard 4 channels anymore. Even on Freeview, you don't.
You've got iPlayer. That's the thing. If you get it on the BBC, you've got iPlayer, and that's worked really, really well for the Women's Premier League in the football.
Yeah,
BBC got hold of that, so that's probably the dream scenario because it just puts it in people's pockets. But getting on something where it's reasonable, people can get hold of it, and it might be something we've not even thought of. There are big players in other countries' markets who aren't operating in the UK, and at some point more of them will want to get a foothold. We've seen some come and go. We had Premier Sports was Viaplay for a couple of years, which is a massive player in that kind of streaming market in Scandinavia and Northern Europe. They came over here, never quite landed the way they liked, and just sold it back to Premier Sports, who are an Irish company, and off they've gone. But you might see Premier Sports picking up other competitions. There's a competition called the Celtic Challenge, where the Irish, Welsh and Scottish unions put together kind of packaged up women's teams. So last year there were 2 Irish teams, 2 Welsh, 2 Scottish.
I think there's three Welsh now available. I think there's 3 Welsh teams set up now. So
and they're doubling their games because they're going to play home and away rather than one or the other this year. There's talk that within a couple of years it will be the 4 Irish provinces, which will be massive because instead of the Clovers or whatever the hell they decide to call themselves here on your Wolfhounds was one of the teams. Yeah, it's Leinster. Leinster means something. Munster. Yeah. Munster have got incredibly passionate fans. It means something.
Imagine that then being able to play at Thomond Park or
and have it as a big competition. Let's see like Leinster versus Glasgow. That's a cracking game in the men's game. It's an event game in that league. Let's make it an event in the women's game as well. And that means that those players, the more you do with that, the more those players aren't in the PWR, which would be a short-term hit for the PWR, but it also means more spots for English players in that league. So you're exposing more of your English talent to elite level rugby, which means you've got an even bigger pathway for the Red Roses. So everyone wins.
I think the Irish game's making really good movements as well. I spoke with Darryl Coyle on last week, and we were talking about the 37 contracts that have been handed to the Irish women's setup. And as you said, most of them are probably centralised contracts. They're still having to do other bits on the side. But I think the intent is there. And apparently it's been bounded around for a little bit longer than possibly people wanted. But from what I can understand and what I've read and what Dara's sort of seen and heard within the area, the IRFU are actually done it without having to withdraw it within a year like the RFU did.
Yeah, and it's kind of drawn a line under a horrible time in Irish women's rugby. They had some real issues with the previous kind of leadership in that space, really poorly treating the women's game, poorly treating some of the players. Cleena Maloney, who's one of their best players, basically got cut from the team because she dared to speak out about their treatment publicly, and only now that kind of all of the people who were in power have gone, is she finally back in the team. They've probably lost 2 or 3 of her best years of rugby.
Yeah.
But they're doing the right thing there. They're giving people contracts. They're focusing a lot of attention on their sevens team, which is still probably one of the best pathways for development in the women's game. Probably one that the men's game doesn't use as much as it should, to be honest. And the women's game have really exploited it. So that's reaping benefits for them. And like Ireland are still quite a distance away from England, France, New Zealand, and that's not going to close up in the next few years. But they've got some fantastic young players coming through, and they're a joy to watch. Aoife Wafer, their number 6, who's come through, is great. She's just box office, runs into everyone, smashes through stuff, works the same level in minute 80 as she did in minute 1. And if they can unearth a few more players like that, then they're going to quickly close the gap with most of the other teams, and they're going to be scratching at that bubble of the top 3 or 4.
I reckon that's probably 8 years away potentially. They've probably got a couple of World Cup cycles to get up to a level of probably competing where the Red Roses are or were a couple of years ago.
100%, but I can see them leapfrogging Australia, leapfrogging the USA, potentially even Canada, and then being just outside that kind of France level. Yeah,
and it's a big statement. It's a big intent, and it's great to see. Again, it's another federation back in their women's game as well. And
100%.
Let's hope it's not just a token gesture. But a lot of them seem to actually mean it, and they're going through the process and making sure that it's actually a long-term viability rather than just saying, we've given these contracts because we've seen the games more marketable, rather than saying, and then actually a year's time, sorry, we fucked up. We didn't do the maths properly. We've got to take that away from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen it in Scotland have been slow to adopt contracts, but they're in place now. They're reaping the rewards of it. And I think where you really measure it is some of the players who you thought were the best players in the Scottish team are struggling to get into it now because other players are building up and taking over. It's like Rona Lloyd, who would have been kind of one of their star backs a couple of years ago, is now quite often on the periphery of their teams, and that's fantastic to see because they're really developing. I think the team that's potentially going the wrong way, certainly in the home nations, is Wales.
Their men's is probably in the same situation, to be honest, Matt. Maybe there's something fundamentally wrong at the WRU, and from what everyone says, I think it is. They've ruined the club game. They've done a pretty decent job of ruining all their any connections between the pro and the amateur level, and the women's game's stagnant at best.
Yeah, and there's just coaching is terrible. Ian Cunningham he seems like a lovely guy, but look at their team, which is, about a third of their team comes from Gloucester Hartbury, and they are a joy to watch. And yet, the moment they pull on that red shirt, it's like all the life's drained out of them.
Yeah.
It should be the easiest coaching job in the world. You wear a shirt that's half red most of the time and you're fantastic. Just pretend there's still a white stripe and go and do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not difficult. But like Likey George, it's like she's never played rugby sometimes when you see her in a Welsh shirt.
I think there's a bigger issue there. I don't think it's down to solely whether a coach. I just don't think they seem to have got all of the setup. It's just disjointed all the way through that.
Yeah, I think it's the visible
union.
tip of the iceberg. Like they're not bothered that they're not getting results from their coach, which tells you they're not bothered about anything else.
Yeah,
and they'll catch up eventually because they're a proud country, particularly in rugby terms. So at some point they're going to end up with so much egg on their face they're not going to be able to handle it anymore, and they'll catch up. But it's a real weird blip time, and I don't like to see it much as Wales are the team I most like to see England beat. I like to see England beat them because they're normally pretty good. It's a bit dull if it's an easy fixture.
Yeah, no, it'd be great to see them actually having a go and sort of creating that rivalry that the men's game has as well. That'd be it. At the minute, we've got France, we've got New Zealand at the sort of the top echelons, but the local regions of the local country, like we're miles ahead. Like it's proven with the Six Nations how many times we've won that, and that gap's not going to get closed suddenly either. And is there any point of partaking in the Six Nations when it's nearly a foregone conclusion? Like everyone you talk to about Formula One, Lewis Hamilton was in it 4 years. I stopped watching it. Then somebody else comes in on a cycle. There's a little bit of movement around, and people lose a bit of interest, regain a little bit. France aren't closing the gap. The gap's getting probably a little bit wider potentially at the minute. Obviously, we've now sort of caught up with the Black Ferns, and sort of it's going to be between the top two. Is France ever really going to close that gap and properly compete for the title at the minute? Unless there's a serious injury crisis at England, I can't see that either.
No, I think France have got the players, but something's not quite there. Whether it's fitness, whether it's sharpness,
The men's team do exactly the same. They've got probably the best team in the world at times, but they do the French way and they'll blow up and somebody will punch somebody in the throat randomly or headbutt somebody and they'll completely blow their own game up and they'll throw everything away that they don't work so hard to get to. It's just the French way.
And it feels like a lot of French women's players retire relatively young as well. They kind of do 2 World Cup cycles and then go, you know what, I need to go and get a job. I need to start thinking about how I'm going to live when I get older. So I'm off. They had, their 9 is Pauline Bourdon, who was great, but she used to be in a tandem with Laura Sansus. It was phenomenal. And actually, they're a couple.
Right.
Outside of rugby as well, which is fascinating. Like 2 people competing for the same position who are a couple. Just blows my mind. But Sansus at 27 and probably the best scrum half in the game, literally the female equivalent of Dupont, went, I'm just going to hang them up. I'm off. And that tells me there's something. They're not getting a support. They're not, and it might be purely money, but my heart tells me it might be more than money. It might be advice. It might be help to think about kind of what the future is like. Because it doesn't always need to be like, here's an extra 10 grand a year. It might be, you know what, we can only pay you this much, but we can give you access to financial advisors. We can pay for your education. We can get you degrees and things like that. It's something that works in other smaller sports. I'm an ice hockey fan as well.
Yeah.
British ice hockey, not particularly good, but they still get some decent players over from America and Canada because they hook them up with uni degrees when they come over. So they get young players over. They do a degree while they're over here, so they get a degree from a British university, and then they go home again. Yeah, so everyone benefits, but it's not a huge amount of cost. So there's so many other things that clubs and nations could do to really support those players without having to do what the men's Prem did and probably shot itself in the foot by giving people big wages straight away. I mean, you look at it now, there's multiple players at every team are on £250,000, £300,000 a year.
Yeah.
And for those players, more power to them. They deserve every penny they can claw out of those clubs.
Yeah.
But the clubs have shot themselves in the foot because now they're having to sometimes give $100,000 to a pretty mediocre player, and that hamstrings them, and it's costing them a ton of money, especially in a sport where it's really easy to get injured and be out for a long time.
And the thing, there's also and then you drop down to the Championship. There's no buffer. There's no backup. They're on peanuts. Like, we had Charlie Beach on really early doors as well, and Charlie saying about his experience in there, and the golf. He said he probably only hit sort of 40 grand when he was in the Prem back then. As soon as he dropped to the Championship, he was lucky if he was near the 20 mark. And nobody's paying any bills, not in the current life, not even years back. Like, that is basically, you're getting paid pub money to go and play nigh on pro game and expected to train twice a week and your gym sessions outside and then play a very, very high standard of rugby, because it's no mugs league either, the Championship. You've got the people that have come down from the Prem, you've got the ones that didn't quite make it, and then you've got the nippers that are coming through from Prem clubs trying to prove the point. You're getting battered. There's no airs or graces around, but you're getting a proper game of rugby, and it's brilliant to see, but we don't get to see it enough. And they don't also get rewarded. It's bonkers.
Almost all those clubs are semi-pro now. Ealing are fully pro. I think Doncaster might be. Pretty much all the rest are
pro was within the title, but again, I think some of their salaries are around the 15 grand mark, which is basic
most
wage,
others are
minimum wage.
I like Open that we're a semi-pro club. All these players have jobs.
Yeah, and
they train 2 days a week, if that. It's just not sustainable. And actually, there was a brilliant piece in, I think it was the Times, maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was showing that there were players in kind of the third, fourth, fifth tier who were earning more than Championship players. Because if you've got like a rich sponsor at a club, you can pay some ex-pro to turn out for their team. No one's looking at it. No one's monitoring that money like they are in the top couple of divisions. So there's a lot of, I'd imagine, not literally anymore, but brown paper envelopes that mysteriously appear in someone's shoe while they're out on the pitch, going on down there. And you look at it, like a team like Rosslyn Park is absolutely stuffed with ex-pros who work in London now. They're almost all in finance. And they turn out for those teams on the weekend and probably get quite a tasty little kind of chunk of pocket money for someone who's got a well-paying full-time job. And
we've got Jersey, obviously the same. They're coming up through the leagues. Jersey Reds obviously went bust. They all decided to stay there, play rugby for their local club. They're flying through the leagues. They dominated the level 7 or whatever it was last season. They're up. They've gone the level above now or something like that, and they're flying up through the leagues. But they're all financial lads. They're all working on the island, and brilliant. Fair play to them. They've got to play rugby. They want to play rugby. They want to stay in the area. They're going through it. The same as Camberley did it. Camberley done it a few years. They had a big rise up through the leagues. They've sort of hit a plateau as well. So they got sort of missed out on promotion from the league that obviously haven't just got into Nat 2. So they kind of got held back. So they've kind of hit a plateau, Camberley, but they want to try and take that up as well. But I think Jersey have just gone into that league. You had East Grinstead. East Grinstead had it, didn't they? So they had the geezer come in, pump money in. He was paying geezers stupid money. Then he had a big falling out, and then decided to start unscrewing the doors off the changing rooms and stuff to start to reclaim points.
It's mental.
As much as it goes in, it can come out so quickly in this game.
Absolutely, and actually, it almost I could see. I don't think it will happen, but I could see a road where we go down almost the Japanese rugby model. Like the Japanese league all the teams have kind of normal team names now. 3-4 years ago, it was like Coca-Cola Reds versus versus Toyota. And all those teams were corporate sponsored, and all those players had a nominal day job for the company that they worked for, which is hilarious. I mean, there is no way 80 cap Kiwi players were actually rocking up to be the security supervisor or whatever the hell it was, but that was kind of the tick because it was a company league. And maybe that's where we end up, and probably not to that level, but like franchisee type teams at the top level, because that's the only way you can generate money. And if it fails somewhere, someone can buy it and move it. Like you can't move a club that's embedded in its community, and you shouldn't. But
I think there's too many stakeholders now. That's the biggest issue. It's become a business before it's become a profitable business. It's going
to almost take a rival league coming in and doing something different, and the Prem falling apart, and someone else sweeping up the pieces before it fundamentally changes.
Yeah, I can't see it changing under the current guard.
No, but something needs to at some point, or we're the men's game is at risk, and maybe it is. Maybe the men's game is going to diminish, and in 10, 15 years' time, rugby will be a primarily women's sport. Also happens to have men playing it. Wouldn't be a bad thing.
So this year, then the PWR. What are you going to hang your hat on then, Matt? Who's going to win it? Who's going to be the shock of the season? What we got?
Well, I think it's really hard to bet against Gloucester Hartpury, but I'm going to. I think they'll be in the mix. I think the top four is not going to change very much. I think it's going to be Gloucester, Sarries, probably Exeter and Bristol. And Bristol have got better year on year, and Dave Ward's doing a grand job there. And I think it's their year. I think they're going to take it home. I think with the World Cup come in, they've got key England players in key positions. The way the league is built, that it will finish before the Six Nations. So it's a really compressed season. So all those players are going to be playing like Billy O. The final happens, and then they go off and they're with England until the World Cup thereafter. So they're going to want to hit form at the right time. So with an All England front row, with Abby Ward in their second row, with Holly Aitchison pulling the strings at 10, and Kira Bevan, who's going to want to lock down the Welsh Nine shirt at 9 as well. I think they're poised, and actually I think they've got a young winger called Renika Bonner, who I think might be a bolter to make the World Cup squad as well. If you get a couple of back three injuries, and you want a young player to bring through, she might be the bolter that comes through. So I'm going to hang my hat on Bristol at the top of the league. And I think if you're going to ask me the other end, I think it's probably Leicester Tigers, because I just don't see them. They've got their top end talent is phenomenal, but they've only really got that in 3 or 4 positions. In some other positions, you look at it and you go, have you even got a Prem level player there, let alone an international? I just don't think they've got the depth.
Do you think the stability issues at Ealing could unwind that situation, or?
I think Ealing will be down there. I think your bottom 3 is Tigers, Ealing, Sale, but I think Ealing have got a little bit more top end talent who can just win a game on their own, and they'll probably fluke a couple of games that Leicester maybe won't. Although Leicester have got, I shouldn't have favourite players. You're allegedly objective when you cover the game, but I absolutely do. And my all-time favourite player to watch is Amy Cockayne. She is at Leicester.
She's quality.
She's magic. So if she is on one, she might drag that team kicking and screaming to a win it absolutely doesn't deserve. And I think with that bottom 3, one win will probably be all the difference, because I think they're all going to really struggle this year.
What do you reckon the shock of the season is going to be then? Who's going to sort of come out, and who might throw the cat amongst the pigeons with who they've signed and what they've done?
I think the top 4 will be the same top 4, but if you wanted me to put a flyer on an outside bet to make the final from basically nowhere, I think I might say Quins.
I think they've signed very, very well. I think they've added in the right places.
They've made some good signings. They've made some. I think you mentioned the Spanish back, who was, I think it's a really good pickup. Alex Callender is a fantastic pickup, and I actually think they made some canny kind of Depth signings as well. Bimba's one. Emma Swords at 9. It's a really good signing. Is going to put pressure on Lucy Packer to kind of fight for that shirt. And Ella Cromack, who's 10 for England under-20s. She's got a full season under her belt now, playing 10 there.
Yeah.
So that can only help her as well. So Quins, I suspect they'll be kind of middle of the pack. But if they line everything up right, they've got the quality to fly right through. It's just whether they can do it consistently. And again, another team that's had quite a big coaching setup change over the off-season. So it'll be whether that works for them or whether that takes time.
Interesting. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. And great to shine that light on the PWR just ahead of the season opener. Hopefully we can obviously catch up towards the end ahead of the RW.
Find out how wrong I was.
Yeah, see where those hats were hung and how far you missed. But then we can start teeing up ready for the Rugby World Cup, because that looks like it's going to be a barnstormer. I think they've announced 50,000 tickets already sold on day one of ticket sales. So looks like it's going to be some big crowds ready to go. So
yeah, I mean, if you wanted to be really kind of, they've not been, and I like that, but some media people would have gone, well, the tickets aren't even technically on sale yet because it's all pre-sale, and they sold 55,000 at Twickenham for a double header day, which is a smart move. You get the bronze game and the gold game.
Brilliant.
And they're about to put the Stadium of Light, which should be the England's opening game, that's about to go on sale as well. So we'll see what happens. I'm waiting for the Brighton games. I want to get along to Brighton and see a game there.
You don't want to go Stadium of Light. I've been up there. Watched Pompey draw 1-1. And it's a long old day up there. It's a long trip on the train. But it takes
Brighton's
forever.
A great place. And you know, there's always that hope in your heart that you're going to see the women's version of Japan-South Africa. Yeah.
No, it'd be phenomenal. Matt, thank you so much, mate. For everyone that obviously that wants to hear from Matt, where can you find most of your articles so people can have a read and listen to you spout your opinions on the old black and white?
Yeah, absolutely. So almost everything I've written for the past couple of years is on Rugby Pass. So go on Rugby Pass, search for my name. I'm on Instagram at Matt Merritt. Twitter the same, although Twitter's X is a bit of a cesspool now, so I try not to post over there as much. But Threads, Blue Sky, it's all at Matt Merritt, so pretty easy to find.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Matt. Thank you so much for jumping on. It's great to have a Pompey lad as well. So thank you very much, mate. That's it.
Catch you soon, buddy. Take care.
Cheers, mate.
So it brings another episode of Rugby Through the Leagues podcast to an end. Just want to say thank you to everyone that's got involved, everyone that's commented, everyone that's been listening, subscribing, all of those bits. It's great to see that people are taking some sort of value from what I do. And we're looking at adding some more bits to the bow as well. Obviously, we've got the Rugby Returns, so don't forget to check out that. Obviously, completely different change of pace this week with a journalist that writes about rugby rather than being a player or a DOR or a coach or anything like that. It's good to get a different aspect on the game as well, and the PWR obviously is back, so it's great to get women's rugby in that limelight again, and some great players. Obviously, the women's 15 international games are on at the minute as well, so some great bits to see there, and some emerging talents in the PWR as well. So next week we've got Tom Martin on. So Tom is a sevens performance analyst for the All Blacks. So it's going to be a nice late one for me because of the time differences. But Tom's obviously been involved in 2 Olympic cycles, been able to work with some amazing sevens players within obviously the All Blacks setup. I believe he's come to an end of his sevens as well, so we'll be able to find out whether he's branching across to 15s and what his plans are for the next sort of part of his career as well. But what a team to be working with is the All Black Sevens. So hopefully we can find out what ticks and how that makes him tick and what makes the All Black Sevens work so well, apart from what seems to be getting that gold medal over the line recently. But it's a really good guest again, and another different aspect of rugby. So let's get subscribing, get following, get liking, get it shared with everyone else. Whatever you can do to grow the pod, it will help. One last thing from me. Thank you and goodbye.